Welcome to the Red Flag Mania podcast, your one-stop shop for all things fraud. We're diving deep into the world of scams, corruption, and whistleblowers. Think of us as your personal fraud detectives, unearthing the hidden scandals, the brave souls who dare to expose them, and the lessons we can all learn from their experiences. So grab your popcorn, start your walk, or sit back and get ready to dive into the murky depths of the human condition. We're your hosts, Roni Jackson
and Kelly Richmond Pope,
and this is the Red Flag Mania podcast. Kelly, what are we talking about today?
I couldn't wait for you to ask me that question. So today, do you like JFK stuff? Because I know you like Elvis stuff.
Well, you know Elvis.
Because we'll go down the Elvis rabbit hole.
We've lost hours on Elvis.
But
hours.
Have you ever gone down a JFK rabbit hole?
No, I haven't.
Okay. So today we're talking about the JFK story.
Okay.
So hold on. So I'll tell you where this came from. So I went to go see this movie called Jackie. Have you ever seen it?
I don't remember Jackie. I don't remember the movie, but everyone knows about Jackie.
Okay, right. Because she's Jackie Kennedy.
Yeah.
So
NASA's Kennedy.
I know, right? Mm-hmm. So I love all things JFK, all things Jackie, all things Little John. When he passed away, I was devastated. Like you would have thought I knew him.
Flying a plane.
Going down.
Crashing.
It's terrible.
In the vineyard too, wasn't
it? Somewhere in Massachusetts.
All right, East Coast.
Oh, all right. Anyhow, so in the movie, I went with a friend of mine and I noticed a scene where President Kennedy and Jackie are walking into the White House and there's a black man standing at the front door.
In the 1960s.
Yes. And I was like, wait a minute, Who is that? And she says to me, oh, they put him in the movie. And I said, who? She said, that character represents Mr. Abraham Bolden. And I said, who is Abraham Bolden?
It was like an official, or is that why?
Yeah, because I never knew that there was anybody that was black around a president in those times.
Yeah.
So she says, stop talking during the movie. And I'm like, but I got to know who he is. So anyhow, she says, when the movie's over, look him up. So I go and look him up and find out Mr. Bolden was the first African-American Secret Service agent to guard a president. And I was like, no kidding.
That's amazing.
Right?
It's amazing.
So I never knew that. So I'm down this rabbit hole, Roni. I start reading about him. Come to find out, guess where he lives?
Chicago.
South Side.
Chi-town.
So I call him. I look him up on White Pages, find his phone number, and I call him. So
that was when we had the White Pages.
Yeah, the whitepages.com.
Right.
So I look him up, call him. There's a phone number listed.
Okay.
And he picks up the phone. I say, hi, Mr. Bolden. My name is Kelly Pope. I'm a professor.
Click.
He hung up the phone. Like, who does that, right? So you're not going to hang
Someone who doesn't want to talk to anybody about his story.
So I call him right back. I said, hi, Mr. Bolden. This is Kelly Pope. Do not hang up the phone, please. And he hangs on.
A little dog like a bone.
I'm a dog with a bone.
I'm a dog with a bone.
You're going to talk
You were going to talk to me. Okay.
So anyhow, he listens. And I told him that his character was in this movie and I'd love to interview him. And he listened and he sighed and he says, okay. I said, where do you live? He gave me his address and the rest is history.
Wow.
So that's what we're going to talk about today. That's what we're going to dissect the Abraham Bolden story.
Okay. I am very interested in hearing about Abraham Bolden's story from his perspective. I've read a couple of stories about his story, and I think there's so much to uncover.
And you know what's going to happen next? You know we're going to Dallas, right? Because we're going to go to the site where President Kennedy was assassinated. We're going to go all in.
Okay, and then to Memphis.
And then to Memphis to Graceland.
Right, because we have to go to Graceland.
We got this whole worked out. Okay.
Yeah.
So you ready?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest story, and probably the question on the table is this story a conspiracy?
Ooh.
Or is this fact?
I don't know. Let our listeners find out.
All right, listeners, it's on you.
Abraham Bolden. I'm a former Secret Service agent, former state policeman, and first African American assigned to the Pinkerton National Detective. Also, the first African American to be assigned to the White House detail under President John Kennedy. You know, going through life as a young man, we want to be many things. But what I really wanted to be deep in my heart was a solver of the problems of my people growing up in a small town, seeing the suffering of the people, seeing the stabbings and killings. I witnessed a couple of neighbors that were stabbed to death. I always wondered in the back of my mind, why is this happening? Why are these things happening? And as I had said before, I was a mischievous person, but there was something in me that was seemed like it was trying to get out. It was a love for all people. It was a love. So I used to stand in front of the mirror and practice being a minister. In the meantime, I was a musician. I became quite a proficient musician. My whole family were musicians, and the ones that are left today, they are all musicians, play for churches and play for weddings and things like that. So now, as I grew up, wanted to be a musician, I became a proficient trumpet player and got a scholarship to Lincoln University. So in going to Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri, I graduated with a BA in composition and fine arts. Now, at that time, I was sort of in between two parallel lines. I had offers of a job in the music situation at a high school in Haytown, Missouri. My wife at that time, I had become married, and this was in 1956. Saw a job in the paper and from Pinkerton National Detective Agency and said, hey, Pinkerton National Detective Agency are looking for detectives. And in my experience, I knew that Pinkerton was an all-white organization, except the uniformed men who were standing outside in the rain, or, the routine guards who would go around and pull the clock. They did not have any detectives. So my wife told me, go over there and apply and see. You've been talking about helping the people. You've been talking about the crime situation. So I took the opportunity. I went over there. 705 North Olive Street in St. Louis, Missouri, on the 12th floor. So I went over to Pinkerton and walked into the office and told the little secretary there that I was there to apply for a job as a Pinkerton detective. She says that we're not hiring. And I pulled out the little ad that my wife had cut out the paper and given me. I had that in my vest pocket. I pulled it out and handed it to her. And she says, well, we're not hiring people like you. And it just so happened that Mr. Mertz, his name was Mr. Mertz, he was a district director for all of the Pinkerton in the district. And the district was Detroit, St. Louis, I think Chicago. He just traveled around in Seattle. It just so happened that he was making an evaluation at that office, and he heard the conversation. So he came out and told us, as a secretary, he said, what's the problem here? She says, well, he's looking for a job, the detective, and we don't have one open. He said, yes, we do. He says, have him fill out, give him an application. Have him fill it out and send him in to talk to me. And so that's what I did. I filled out the application. And he sat me down. He said, you're a remarkable man. You're going to be the first African-American Pinkerton detective that we hire. since 1865 when Pinkerton was formed. I told him I think I wasn't really excited about it, you know, so. And that was prior to all this civil rights stuff that came about in the 60s. So I went to work for Pinkerton. They sent me to school and everything. So the wife was looking at the paper a year later, and she says, Abraham, she says, the state police have an ad that they're hiring patrolmen. I said, well, I'm doing okay with Pinkerton. I like the job, undercover detective. She says, well, you might like the job, but you ain't cutting it on the finance. and that the state policeman was paying twice what I was making. So I filed an application and I became a state policeman, Illinois state policeman. And I moved up in being a policeman. I became in the first Illinois State Vice Squad that was formed, and that was formed in 1959. Now, there was a young senator who was running for president of the United States, John F. Kennedy. Kennedy was coming to Peoria where I was stationed on one of these campaigns. He was on a campaign trail. And he came into Peoria Airport. I was stationed in the middle of the intersection where the car had to make a left turn and head towards Peoria. I waved at President Kennedy. He was not the president then. I saw his hired guards and everything. He did not have Secret Service agents. Only one Secret Service agent came there to investigate to the hotels and where he was going to live and things like that. And his name was Fred Backstrom. So in talking to Fred Backstrom, I had to escort Fred Backstrom around. I asked, do they have any Negro Secret Service agents? Mr. Backstrom, who was a special agent in charge in the Springfield office, says, I don't think so, but you can give it a try. And come to Springfield, take the test, and we'll see how it comes out. So I went to Springfield, took the test, and on October the 30th of 1960, I became a Secret Service agent and was transferred to Chicago, Illinois. Now, that was quite a step because I continued to move up. The more I moved up, the more I learned. The more I learned about the problem, the more I learned about really what the solution should be. And it was not all that I thought it would be. It was a disappointment because the higher I went in the police work, the more corruption I saw, the more disrespect for the rights of the people I saw. And that was part of the problem. The more prejudice I saw in East St. Louis, in being raised, we kind of knew our place. But I thought that as a person would move up, that these obstacles that were being thrown in our path would be eliminated simply because we were becoming more educated and our environment was increasing. But that's not the way it was. I came to Chicago. I ran into blatant racism in the Secret Service office. The agents didn't want me there. Some refused to work with me. And they would tell off-color jokes, racial jokes, that I couldn't tolerate. So I became known as, they call me thin skin, because I would not accept jokes that belittle not only black people, but Jews also. And I found it really unacceptable. I found it unacceptable to the extent that I had thought about going back to the state police. Because Captain Lindeen had said, I'll just put you on 30-day leave. And if you don't like the Secret Service, you can come back in 30 days with full benefits, full salary, everything. Nothing changed, as if I was just gone for 30 days. Now, but I stayed because my wife liked Chicago. She loved Chicago and she wanted to go to the art institution. So I stayed. Now, when I became a Secret Service agent, I became a part of the agents that were stationed here in Chicago, Illinois. It just so happened that President Kennedy won the election. He beat Nixon by some 8,000 votes in Cook County, and that put him over into the presidency of the United States. So on April the 28th, President Kennedy was coming to Chicago in order to thank Mayor Daley for getting his troops out and getting the vote. Now, there's a detachment of agents that travel with the president that are stationed in Washington, D.C. And they traveled with the president when he was coming to Chicago. The Chicago agents have to augment the force of agents that come from Washington, D.C. and be integrated into the protection, his protection. So they were assigned posts along along McCormick Place. Now, my post originally was near the president, where the president was going to come in, the entrance where he would come in. They took my post and gave it to a white policeman and put me down 2 levels in front of a washroom. And they made a big joke out of it. Now here, I'm going to the washroom. Most of the time, the agents are near the personal presence of the President of the United States. They guard the president. The detachment of policemen and soldiers and other people are assigned to the periphery zone. They take care of the open buildings, they take care of this and that, but they switched. But as it so happened at 8:30 p.m. on April 28, 1961, the motorcade pulled up at McCormick Place. The first thing that the president wanted to do was use the washroom. And there I stood. Of course, my attire was immaculate. I had prepared to be in the presence of the president. So my shoes were shining like glass. My suit and everything was straight, man. I was tough. And I had my new shoes on. I had my Sunday shoes on. Buster Browns. And they were smoking, man. And when the president stopped in front of me, I was a little nervous. I thought I was standing in his way. So I went to step aside, because I was a big guy at that time, weighing about 206 pounds, all muscle. And it was all uphill. You know, as I got old, it's all down here now. It's in the basement. And the president came down the steps, accompanied by every politician, Democratic politician, in Illinois. I shook hands with so many politicians, and the president stopped right in front of me. And he asked me, he said, "Are you a Chicago policeman? Are you a Secret Service agent or one of Mayor Daley's finest?" Meaning a Chicago policeman. "So I'm a Secret Service agent, Mr. President." We shook hands. I never saw a more person with more gentle eyes than President Kennedy had. I just could feel the sincerity that he had enumerated during all of his campaign speeches. This was a fantastic man. To me, he was God sent. My people loved President Kennedy because of the sincerity that he exuded in all of his speeches. The president looked me in the eye and he smiled. One of the agents said, "This is Agent Bolden. He's stationed here in Chicago." So the president looked me in the eye and he smiled. And he said, "Mr. Bolden, has there ever been a Negro Secret Service agent assigned to the White House detail in Washington, D.C.?" Now, he knew the answer because the president was very astute. He was very aware of his surroundings. I said, "Not to my knowledge, Mr. President." And he looked at me and smiled again. He said, "Would you like to be the first?" I said, "Yes, sir, Mr. President." He said, "I'll be looking forward to seeing you in Washington, D.C." And I couldn't believe my ears. It was like a dream. Here I met the president, shook hands with the president, and he invited me to become a historical figure. It's something that it's almost like a story in some book or something that I just couldn't imagine that this was true. So I rushed home in this house and came in the back door and told my wife, Barbara, I said, "I met President Kennedy." She looked at me and said, "You lying?" I said, "Yeah." I shook her hand. She said, "You lying?" I said, "No, he invited me to Washington, D.C. to be the first African-American on the White House detail." And she said, "You going to accept?" "Sure, I'm going to accept." So about 2 weeks later, I got a letter from Washington, D.C. appointing me to the White House detail. And I knew that was happening because President Kennedy made it so. So on June the 6th of 1961, I flew to Washington, D.C., made that long walk up to the White House, and became the first African-American assigned to the White House detail. And that put me into not only Secret Service history, but into the history books worldwide. And I knew the significance of it when it happened. But I didn't know the full full consequences, because this relates back to my want to do something about the suffering of the people. I didn't know it at the time. Now, as a Secret Service agent, I traveled around and I listened to the attitudes of some of the agents that were guarding the president. They hated the president, especially those from the agents who were from the South. I heard Secret Service agents who were sworn to protect the president say that if someone tried to kill the president, they wouldn't protect him. that he was a nigger lover, and that he needed to be killed. One day before the president was actually assassinated in the Chicago office, one of the agents said, President Kennedy need his brains blown out. The next day it happened. I did everything that I could do to bring to the attention the attitude of the agents surrounding the Secret Service. I went to the chief of the U.S. Secret Service prior to the assassination. And I told U.E. Bauman, and this was on July the 6th of 1961, that if an event occurred where the president's life was in danger, the president would be assassinated. I told him under no certain terms, no holding back, that agents would not protect the president as they were sworn to do, and that there were agents who were so racist on the White House detail that they should be moved, that they were lollygagging and going around with holes. They were playing, drinking, when they should be working. And all of these things added up to me a great danger to the president, because I knew that there were those who hated the president so much that they would take action to kill him. And I was trying to avoid that before I left the White House detail. Now, you know, even now today, I suffer because I don't know if I did the right thing. Let me tell you why. Because when we were coming back from Hyannisport on July the 5th of 1961, I got on a helicopter with President Kennedy. President Kennedy was sitting right across, and I was facing him. His seat was facing forward on a helicopter. One of the senior agents was sitting next to me. And I have just bad feelings even now. Should I have brought this up in front of the president? But I was thinking, you know, I had been a state policeman. And if you have a complaint, you have a chain of command. And I was thinking, what if I said something to the president and he became so annoyed because he had been a Navy person and he's familiar with the chain of command also. You're not supposed to communicate with the top official until you try to solve the matter up the line. And I have troubled feelings today as to should I have broken that chain of command and just came out and told the president, Mr. President, your life is in danger. Secret Service agents are not going to protect you. But I didn't. When we got on Air Force One, I flew on Air Force One from Otis Air Force Base to the Air Force Base in Washington, D.C. Got back to the White House, where I asked to see the chief of the U.S. Secret Service. Now, James Rowley was the chief of the White House detail. There were two chiefs. Chief U.E. Bauman was the chief of the whole Secret Service. He answered to the department, the head of the Department of the Treasury. The White House detail chief answered to U.E. Bauman, you see, and that was the chain of command. And so I went over the chief of the White House detail, James Rowley, straight into the chief of the whole Secret Service. Now, after I had explained the conduct of the Secret Service, how they were driving women and getting drunk, and how they were bringing women into the hotel room and laying their pistols around where they could be stolen, all of these type of things. This U.E. Bauman retired after he had written the information down. James Rowley became chief of the Secret Service, the whole Secret Service. So he had possession of what I had gone over his head and told U.E. Bauman. When James Rowley became chief, I knew my days were numbered. You see what I'm saying? I knew my days were numbered, and I came back to Chicago. I tried to get jobs. I tried to leave the Secret Service, go to St. Louis. I tried for a job at the Air Force Base in Milwaukee somewhere. I wanted to get out of there. And this was in 1963. We had so many threats against the president's life. The difference is that these were not threats by some nut. They were threats by organized people, organizations, like the DRE, the Cuban Assassin Organization, the Ku Klux Klan, the right-wingers. They were organized threats against the president. As a matter of fact, we intercepted a telephone call from a man named Miltier in Miami. We had an informant who had made connections with Miltier, and they were having a conversation. Miltier told our informant, President Kennedy is going to be assassinated. And our informant asked him, well, how are you going to do this? He said, we're going to put a rifleman in a tall building and kill him with a rifle in a telescopic sight. That's where Kennedy was killed. Now this happened, this conversation occurred on about November the 8th. So the Secret Service, we knew what he had said. Miltier said, don't worry about the Secret Service. We will take care of those guys. They won't get in the way. We had that information. When Kennedy came to Chicago, he was supposed to come on November 2nd for an Army Air Force football game. But he had to abort that because riflemen were here in Chicago, set up to kill him. And the only reason that they didn't carry that out, I believe, is because there was a president's special events coordinator that attended the Secret Service meeting when we were setting up the protection. And his name was O'Reilly. And I believe he told Mayor Daley about the threat. President Kennedy canceled his trip to Chicago because the threat was so serious. And Mayor Daley, I'm sure that Mayor Daley put out the word to all his ward and gangsters, because they all together, they were all gangsters, that if the president got hit in Chicago, it's going to be hell to pay. So on the 8th, 18th of November, I went back to Washington, D.C. And what they did was very suspicious. I went to see the special agent in charge of the undercover detail. His name was Mr. Conner. And they had a special assignment for me. Now, this is the 18th of November, 1963. They wanted to put me on a special assignment in which they were going to erase my birth certificate, give me a new name, change my identity completely. Even my wife wouldn't be able to prove who I was. They were going to give me a new fingerprint card, birth certificate. In other words, they were going to erase Abraham Bolden from the face of the earth. And they told me to think about it because they knew that I had knowledge of these assassination plots. And I was very vocal about the laxity of the Secret Service. They really wanted me out of the way, but they didn't want to blow my head off, nothing like that. They just want to eliminate me. So like they do other CIA agents, they could deny anything that I say. I said, I'm a Secret Service. No. My name is Abraham Bolden. No, we have no such record of Abraham Bolden in the Secret Service. We had the Southern right-wingers, we had the segregationists, but they all one organization. They all one. They work under one head. These are like branches from the same tree. And when it comes to operations like that, I believe, in fact, I have some evidence that it was a government hit, organized hit. The U.S. government was responsible for the assassination of President Kennedy. And the person directly responsible who coordinated and was behind it was Lyndon Baines Johnson.
Wow, right? Stay tuned for part 2 to find out more about Abraham Bolden's incredible story.